Welcome to Data Skeptic All About Surveys, our season about survey design, interpretation, and methodology. Let your voice be heard at survey.dataskeptic.com. Hey, before we kick off our interview this week, thanks to those of you who wrote in with book recommendations. Thanks especially to Mattis, who sent the most exhaustive list of all of those who wrote in. I compiled the list of all of the overlaps and the ones that I thought were most popular, and we just kicked off a new survey about this. For the time being, I wanted to make this super easy, so I took down all of our regular survey interface, and for this week, go to survey.dataskeptic.com, and the only survey you're going to get when you go there is the one I just launched about asking your preference over the 10 most popular or seemingly popular AI books from all of the write-ins I got. It will literally take you 30 seconds. Please, if you're hearing this right around the release date, April 10th, 2023, head to survey.dataskeptic.com and answer 2 questions about your reading preference. That's just 2 questions. You don't have to come back later. Very simple survey, but I have a very simple outcome. That's all I need. If I wanted to study a more complex phenomenon, if I needed a longitudinal tracker study to see how opinions or some other factor evolves over time, that would be a much more challenging undertaking. It's hard enough to get people to take a survey, but to get them to take it once and then come back later and fill out a second round and maybe a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, it shouldn't take a statistician to realize you're going to have a dropout rate. You know, as Fishbone said, that's the reality of my surroundings. If over time your respondents are dropping out, your analysis has to consider that. Do you just not count those people? Do you try to impute their values? Well, those are 2 of the many options available. But that's the key focus of today's interview, on non-response bias. When people don't participate in your survey, how does that bias your results? We come at that question from several angles, right after this.
My name is Yajuan Si. I'm a research associate professor in the Survey Methodology Program, Survey Research Center at University of Michigan. Yesterday, we were celebrating the 20 years anniversary for the currently named or renamed as Michigan Program in Survey and Data Science. We train students with a very diverse background across 36 sociology, psychology, political science, and others. And we train them the sampling approaches together with quantitative methods to analyze survey data.
How big is the program?
We have a master's degree and a PhD degree. Currently, we have maybe together 50 students from both programs. But then this year, we had a record high number of applicants for both the PhD and master programs. So maybe we will grow dramatically starting this September.
That's exciting. And can you talk a little bit about your own role there? What do you do mostly?
I'm a faculty member in this program. My responsibilities mainly cover research, so doing my own methodological innovation or collaborating with researchers from other fields. I teach in the Michigan program in survey and data science too. So I teach statistical courses, for example, the applications of statistical modeling. I teach applied sampling, how to collect data, and I teach the analysis of complex survey data. So after you collect survey data, how would you account for the data collection in your analysis? And I supervise students, provide surveys to the center, to the statistics community.
So these days, with good technology, just about anybody could launch a survey. And after people take it, you can look at a graph of the results. What else is there to analyze?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's easy to take a survey, but it is challenging to have a good survey with data quality. I mean, there's Survey research is originally from statistics. How can you make sure that your data are representative of the target population? That is a very challenging and difficult problem. However, it is often ignored by practitioners.
Well, I know there are many challenges there. One of them is survey non-response. Could you share a few details on the different forms of non-response and why it's a problem?
When you collect the data, if one, for example, individual is eligible and selected into your study, but that individual may refuse to participate. But when you have a design that involves multi-stages of data collection, for example, if you want to collect data from students, then you need to first get to the state officials to get the approval of the state officials. They may reject. And then you need to go to the district level, and the superintendent may reject. So that causes no response. When it comes to the school, the principal may not give you the consent. And even they give you and you have selected one child, and the child's parents may not give you the consent. So we have those different levels of refusing to participate in this study. We usually call those as unit non-response because of this non-consents, and the students or the individuals do not provide any information for us. This is the unit non-response. But in contrast to that, even the child is selected and responding to the study, you provide the student, for example, a questionnaire with 100 questions, and the student may only provide answers to 50 of them. So that's the item non-response. So together, the response rates have become a concern. It's because recently for data collection, individuals tend to ignore or pass by the survey. So the non-response rates have been increasing. There was a study from the Pew Research, and they look at the response rates from telephone-based surveys. For the past few years, the response rate was mainly like a single-digit number. That causes concerns to the data collection organizations. So we could have a great design that gives us national representation, for example, but because of the low response rates and the final data or the final cases may not be representative of the target population. But however, response rates are not the only index for non-response bias, because when we talk about bias, you have your analysis of interest. How do the data affect your analysis? And then when we think about the response or non-response bias, we have to think about what is the potential bias if you only look at the cases who respond to the data.
It seems like a very challenging problem in that you have no access to the ground truth, I guess. The non-respondents, they didn't provide their response. What can be done?
Yeah, exactly. So this has been a concern for almost all statistical agencies, for almost all data collection organizations. We don't know the ground truth. In practice, we will try to borrow information during the data collection process. The key is that we have to know that information for both respondents and the non-respondents. And then we have to make assumption. Ideally, the data we can use should be highly correlated to the questions we are interested in. So we want predictive information that is available for both respondents and the non-respondents to adjust the potential bias.
And are there established methods for doing that?
Yes, weighting. You weight the respondents. Suppose one responding individual is given a value of weight, for example, 10, and that individual is representing him or herself and another non-respondents. So this is popularly used in most survey data. They release non-response adjusted weights to correct for the potential bias. It's useful because for one survey, you only need to release one set of weights, and you can apply that weights to all the variables you will analyze from that single survey data set. However, the key is that whether your weights are related to the outcome you are interested in. If they are independent, then adding the weights will mainly inflate your variance estimate. So it will reduce your precision analyzing the data. And researchers don't like those because that may cause failure in detecting any important effects or significant effects. And in contrast to weighting, we also try to do imputation. So the idea is that can we fill in the missing values of those who didn't provide data? Imputation requires a model. How would you fit a model to fill in the potential outcome of those non-respondents? And to quantify the uncertainty due to the imputation model, we do it multiple times, and that's the method called multiple imputation. So it was proposed by Don Rubin in 1970s. It was first proposed to handle missing data, but now it has become a very popular tool to handle any unobserved values, confidential data, suppose the true values are unknown, or any other information you want to protect and generate synthetic data for public release.
This episode of Data Skeptic is made possible in part by Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security. After all, you've already got M365 protecting your workplace. That's good enough. What more could you need? Well, a lot really. What if one of your employees just opened a phishing email and M365 couldn't handle it alone? Now your company has to ground to a screeching halt. Transformers stop transforming. Circuits short circuit, all because of a single email. Like they say, just one match can burn this town. Next time, take 5 minutes to set up Mimecast, a security solution specifically designed for email and workplace collaboration. It detects suspicious emails and diversifies your security stack so you're not just relying on one generic solution. Your inbox is important, so get another layer of protection for it and keep your business from, falling apart. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com. That's Mimecast, MIMECAST.com. Are you a software engineer looking to make an impact with one of the world's premier data and technology companies? Well, you should look into Bloomberg. Bloomberg is building the world's most trusted information network for financial professionals. And right now, they're looking for engineers to join them. For me, there's two critical features when I would consider a new role. Impact first, job security second. Well, in terms of job security, you can look up Bloomberg and see how long they've been around. But more importantly, in terms of impact, you'll be part of a team that builds and delivers tools to help the world's leading business and financial decision makers surface relevant information in an ever-changing ocean of data, so that they can act quickly on it. I once had a job where after completing a really big project that would do fraud detection and elimination in our system, the CFO blocked the project because he was worried it was going to hurt our cost of goods sold. So my solution went on the shelf and the company I worked at continued to defraud its customers. I didn't stay much longer, and the company isn't around today. It was a sad outcome when a really cool solution went on the shelf. But if I had worked at Bloomberg, that wouldn't have been a problem. Their software engineers build solutions that are relied on by more than 350,000 financial professionals all around the world, using them to make critical business decisions. Bloomberg believes in using the right tool for the job. Their stack includes C++, JavaScript, TypeScript, and Python, all languages I love. The company is committed to building a diverse workforce full of fresh perspectives. Finding your new career can be hard, but if you find the right company, it can be rewarding and fun. So if you're in the market or just thinking about what your next move might be, learn more about this opportunity by visiting bloomberg.com/careers. That's bloomberg.com/careers. So I could see where a researcher might come up with a system for weighting or imputing at just their procedure. It's Kyle's procedure for imputation. Is it like a collection of different ideas, or is there robust formal thought on the best approaches for how to do this?
That's a good point. For one study, you have your particular outcome of interest. Which tool is useful depends on the context of your survey data. And we try to develop a protocol for others to follow, but it generally depends on the available data sources you have for the non-response bias adjustment. So you can do weighting and you can do imputation, or you can ignore the missing data or just do fit models and to handle the case that when non-respondence is present. They all have their advantages and disadvantages because they have different assumptions. And we recommend comparison among those approaches if they present different results, and that gives you higher suspicion of the potential bias because some assumptions are not valid here, so we need to look deeper into it. But if different approaches give you similar results, then you may have higher confidence that the bias is low.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good point. Multiple lines of evidence all agreeing with each other is good confidence, I think. Oh, can we talk a little bit about the early childhood longitudinal study? I don't want to take for granted that all listeners will be familiar with it. What is this study?
It is a longitudinal survey conducted by the National Center of Educational Statistics, so we call it NCES. They collect kindergarteners and then they follow them till the students become in the 5th grade. So we call it early childhood. So it's mainly in the elementary school. So they collect the children's characteristics, but they also conduct various assessments in terms of their reading, mathematics, and science performances. And they also gather data from their parents, teachers, after-school caregivers, and the school principals. So those studies have started in early 1990s. Then they try to study the child development and to think about how the different environments from family or school that affect the child's behavior, cognition, and health.
And roughly speaking, how large is the survey?
For the study I was looking at, it was started in 2011, and they have collected around 9,000 children, and then they tend to follow them up till 5th grade. So you can see the non-response is a big concern here. Some children drop out of the study. It's mainly because they got transferred to a different school, and the survey tended to follow them up, but not all of the transferred students got tracked back.
What does that then do for the data? If the student transfers and you can't resample them, as we talked earlier, that's just going to be a null value. But what are some of the concerns about that missing data?
So if they transfer and this causes missing value or non-respondence, if this missing data mechanism or the response mechanism is independent of the children's performances, then we don't have big concerns. But what we are concerned are that for the students who drop out of the study or who got transferred, then we lost track of them, they tend to have a different assessment performances from the students who stay in the study, and that may cause potential bias if we want to look at the overall children's performances.
Prior to reading the paper, my assumption, maybe my own bias I brought to the table, was to assume that a student transferring to another school during their education was probably a negative event, that it wasn't going to help them in their progress, that maybe that could be disruptive to their education. Is that one of the hypotheses that were being considered?
It could be one of the hypotheses, but maybe it's because they moved their residence address, so their parents changed jobs, and those may cause less bias than the situation you just mentioned.
Yeah. It could also be an upgrade in many cases, I guess.
Yeah.
And we don't know. So amongst the techniques like weighting that we discussed earlier, what are the most appropriate ones for this study?
For this study, because the students drop out of the study if they miss the first grade, for example, and we won't have data for their follow-up grades or follow-up waves. So in longitudinal data analysis, we call this missing data as a monotone missing needs pattern. So that means once you drop out, they never come back. To contrast, there is another missing needs pattern is that the student missed one wave or one grade, but they got transferred back, and then you have their later information. But for this particular application, the ECLSK, we look at the monotone missing needs pattern. So when you have a monotone dropout pattern for non-response, weighting uses their previous wave information. So we can look at if one child misses second grade, we can use their kindergarten and first grade measures to check why do they miss or fail to participate in second grade. So we can construct weights by weighting back to the previous wave. And we can also do multiple imputation. So we recommend multiple imputation is because you can include many variables in your imputation model. So you have a flexible imputation engine that uses more information than weighting to get your potential values of your outcome. But the drawback is that for imputation, if you have many variables that were missing during a particular wave, you have to impute all of them. But for a monotone pattern, you don't need to go back and impute the missing values in the previous wave. So you just run a single chain from kindergarten, first grade, second grade. You don't need to come back. So that's one good thing about multiple imputation with a monotone missing data pattern. From our non-response bias adjustment, we compared weighting, imputation, and the modeling approaches. So rather than filling in the missing data, we can just look at the analysis we are interested in and then try to solve or analytically estimate the parameters of interest. So we do not see big differences across the different approaches, and that could be good or bad. So the good thing is that there may not be non-response bias since different approaches give us similar results. But the bad thing is that we may not use the predictive information in the adjustment. So the confidence of this non-response bias adjustment comes from the availability of the information we have. What is the strength of that information with the outcome of the interest?
Well, when it comes to that imputation process and the modeling of it, I think you mentioned you need to figure out what other factors or other questions are, sort of like the feature selection process in machine learning, determine how to figure it out. If this were a politics survey, and the first question is, are you Democrat, Republican?
Yes.
Probably Democrats are good to impute other Democrats and Republicans impute other Republicans. What are some of the factors in the early childhood longitudinal study that you latch onto for imputation?
That's a very good question. So we look at the children's assessment outcomes, for example, their reading assessment outcome. First of all, this outcome itself is an estimated score. So you will be given a list of questions related to reading, then they get a summary score based on the answers to different items. So this is popular in psychometrics. They use the item non-response theory to get a proficiency score based on the item responses. So to predict that score, we were looking at the students' characteristics, mainly sociodemographics. Then we look at their parents' characteristics. For example, their parents' highest education level and also the social economic status of their whole family. And then we also try to look at the school characteristics. What is the school enrollment size? Is it private, public? Or what is the student-to-school ratio? What is the percentage of minority students enrolled in the school? So we were aiming to gather the characteristics that will affect the child's performances in the reading assessment.
And are there any useful software tools that can help you do these processes?
For weighting, the whole process is mainly try to predict the response propensity. So since it is a prediction model, so we compared the popular logistic regression and the machine learning algorithms. So we were using the classification tree models, mainly try to select variables and the interactions among those variables or the nonlinear term among the predictors for the response indicator. And then for imputation, there are many popular R packages, not just in R, the statistical software R. They are also available in SAS, Stata, or other platform, or even standalone imputation software. So we were using the package called MAS, multiple imputation where chained equations. But we also look at other options like MI, and actually my friends and my colleagues are the maintainers for the MI package, and I'm one of the co-authors for it. It's also the multiple imputation where chained equations. And there are also the standalone imputation software like IVE-Ver, and that is seated in the University of Michigan Survey Research Center.
One of the big questions I guess anyone should have about the study is whether or not these non-response biases are present. Because if the early childhood longitudinal study is riddled with biases, it would be bad to make inferences from it. So based on your work, can you estimate the degree to which there is bias from non-response, if at all?
That's a good question. I want to give you a clear or confirmative answer.
Huh?
But because the bias depends on the analysis you look at. When you have different analysis goals, the effect of the response could be different.
Mm-hmm.
So my recommendation is that be cautious about the potential non-response bias and try to see whether the non-response affects your analysis. And then the funding, like the confidence of your findings depends on the strength of the data you have. I wish I would give you a confirmative answer, but this is really depending on the contents and the particular question of interest.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. It really is going to depend on the question you ask. With that in mind, do you have an understanding of what the common questions researchers ask of the data set are? What are people trying to learn?
For educational researchers, they try to look at, for example, the students' performance heterogeneity across different groups. Like for students with a low SES status, will they present different assessment outcomes from those who have high SES? These are the descriptive summaries. You can look at group differences or heterogeneity, but also they want to see the child development trajectory. So if you look at their reading performance from kindergarten to fifth grade, they want to see whether the trajectory or the developmental trajectory has heterogeneity across different groups. So we were using the racial heterogeneity or racial disparity in the assessment trajectories over time. So we do observe that there is difference in terms of their assessment performance trajectory over time among students with different race groups.
And what, if anything, do you think could be done in the future to enhance the work?
Or we recommend the data collection organizations to keep the records that could be predictive of the students' behavior to participate or drop out of the study. So if you gather predictive information for their assessment outcome, and we can use that to adjust the potential non-response bias. I think for me, the question, or when I present any work or write any paper, I want to see whether it will really improve the practice. Like, can people use it, and how can this affect their operation? Yeah, so that is my career goal also. And for this paper, I don't think we are there yet, but it is one step forward.
Definitely. And do you have any advice for maybe young academics who are starting to get into survey work and don't yet know all of the challenges and techniques? What are some good ways to bootstrap oneself?
So survey research is faced with many challenges right now. So the declining response rates are one of the aspects. And also, even though you have low response rate, maybe there's no non-response bias. So it's not a causal question because the non-response bias is affected by multiple factors, not just the response rate. But then the cost is another important factor because when you have a great design and then the data collection cost is very high, then you have to make compromise about your data collection mode or sample size or protocols. So how can you balance the cost and the quality of your survey data is a very important problem. And the survey data, only one type of data that inform policy research, and there are many organic data, such as electronic health records, commercial records, the tax data, or any existing data set that can be used together with the survey data for policy research. So this is called data integration. Can you combine multiple data sources beyond the survey data to have a good data source for your question of interest?
And is there anywhere listeners can go online to learn more about you and your work?
I have my personal website. If you Google my name, Yajuan Si, you will see my UMich website. And then you can also see the Survey Research Center website at University of Michigan. I have many terrific colleagues who have been doing impactful and terrific work to improve the practice of survey research.
Very cool. We'll have links in the show notes for listeners who want to learn more. Well, Yajuan, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your work.
Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, if you've got 30 seconds, maybe less, head over to survey.dataskeptic.com. I'm asking everyone to vote on which of a list of 10 books on AI seem like the most critical to read. Tune in next week to find out what all the other listeners said. And until next time, this has been Data Skeptic, all about surveys.